My name is Sam Jenks, and welcome to another episode of The Way We Source, a podcast hosted by Kodiak Hub, where we share our talks with procurement practitioners, leaders, experts, consultants, content gurus, and people that we find downright inspiring, diving into the role that sourcing and procurement plays in the way we live. If you like today's episode, make sure to give us a rate and also follow the program. Today's guest, we're going to discuss a little bit more about procurement's obsession with one question: how much did we save? But beneath the spreadsheets, negotiations, and yearly supplier reviews, it's a much bigger conversation, one about adoption, usability, relationships, and whether procurement is actually helping the business to move faster or simply adding friction. Today's guest has spent his career challenging that old mindset, from leading ERP and source to pay transformations across logistics, manufacturing, and utilities businesses, to building a consultancy centered around proactive procurement. He's become an outspoken advocate for a more human, value driven approach to procurement, one that moves beyond cost cutting and toward real operational impact. Joining me today is procurement transformation specialist and founder of Proactive Procurement, Bart Van Veldhuizen. Bart, welcome to the show, and I hope that I didn't butcher your last name.
That was fine, Sam. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and honored to be named upon people that you find inspiring.
Well, hey, we're happy to be able to have you as well. Let me ask you, Proactive Procurement, why did
Mhm.
you name the business such?
Because it is my found belief that if you practice procurement in a proactive way, so rather than reactive, the firefighting, you will be able to add way more value to any company that procurement has a seat on the table at. And yeah, basically, I also like the name. It has a certain international ring to it. I must say, over here in the Netherlands, people are somewhat confused when I name the name of my company. But nevertheless, it stands for what I believe in. So that's why I actually named the company. It took me, I think, about 5 minutes before I came up with the name. So it was always somewhere in the back of my mind that if I was to start a company by myself, this was going to be the name of the company.
Well, nice that you were able to realize that dream as well, and nice that you had it in your back pocket. I couldn't agree with you more that I think procurement to deliver real value needs to be proactive. What does proactive procurement mean in practice, though? Right? I think that we hear the conversation of going from reactive to proactive very often, and we, as a provider of SRM solutions, also proliferate that particular notion that it's important to do so. But what does it mean in practice to be proactive?
I think for me, it means that as a procurement department, you need to be the enabling function within the company. So I always jokingly say, that when you're a buyer, you don't actually buy stuff. You make sure that people within the company can actually call off on certain contracts or are able to purchase at suppliers that you have contracted. So if you are able to enable that upfront, so you've talked to the business, you've talked to the business units, you've talked to the stakeholders, and you know actually what is needed within the company. You're able to proactively go out to the market, source what is needed, maybe also do a little bit of a challenge on specification, et cetera, rather than firefighting when the moment is there and actually stuff is needed. So if you're able to enable people within the company to procure and purchase goods or services where you have made the contracts for, that is, in my point, really proactive procurement. You're enabling the company to at its own, without much bureaucracy, purchase what is needed with suppliers that you have contracted. So at the right conditions, the right time, the right suppliers, the right payment terms, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm. Can I ask you, you mentioned the aspect of enabling, right? Um, why do so many organizations still treat procurement, do you think, as a policing function rather than an enabler?
Um, I think it's historically the way it is. So it's I would say outdated policies and procedures that yeah, companies are still treating procurement like, okay, we've always done it this way, and you're only here because we need to have policy and procedure in place. But if that policy and procedures for us is causing too much of a bureaucracy, we will find a way around you, and we'll do it on our own. So I
Right.
think just the name and the reputation of procurement is too much policing and too little, I would say, really enabling and facilitating as it should be.
So how does that look in when it's done right, right? Can you give us some anecdotal experiences from your life as a practitioner, right? In various industries, or for example, in businesses that you're working with, can you give us a few examples of what being a true enabler looks like in practice?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as you know, and as you said in your intro, right, I'm currently working on ERP and source to pay implementation. So really, the I would say the more tech side of things. But what you then also see is that you're changing the procedures where it's needed, right? You don't want to have a procedure and you want to copy that into the source to pay environment. You rather see what has the standard source to pay environment to offer, and how can we then maybe alter our procedure where needed. And I think
Yeah.
one of the biggest examples, or the nicest examples of being really enabling, is setting up catalogs for anybody within the company to use, whether that be for technical materials, whether that be for office materials, etc., etc. So when somebody really needs to buy something that is needed, and there's a budget for, and he or she has also cleared that with the budget owner, with the manager, there is no interference anymore from procurement either, because we've done everything up front. We've enabled, or we've concluded the catalog with the supplier, and it's basically going into the source to pay or P2P purchase to pay system, clicking what you need. It's all there, all the prices, all the conditions, everything is already negotiated, is already contracted. So it's a much faster way of working for anybody that needs anything within a company. And it's really truly proactive, because when you need something and you go out to the market, then there's always this matter of time, this matter of urgency usually behind it. And if you don't have that, then I think for both the user as well as for procurement, is a way better way of working.
And I think that that's a perfect example, particularly within the indirect procurement space. Could you, I would say maybe drive forward on that because obviously, in direct procurement or direct material
Sure.
procurement and or more strategic contracts, not to say that
Hmm.
indirect doesn't hold strategic contracts, but some of the examples you just provided there obviously are. Where does procurement, for example, make the most impact, right? By, of course, enabling itself early, one understands that. But what are some examples or anecdotes from your past where you've seen proactive or in a proactive approach to procurement in a direct material space make a real impact or move the needle, to use a cliche phrase?
Hmm. I think a nice anecdote is when I was working with a third-party logistic provider. We were outfitting many of the big warehouses that you see with shelves and with racks. And yes, of course, anytime that you do that, you can start looking for, or you can, send out a mini RFP, request for pricing or request for quotation. But you usually end up with the same supplier. So rather than doing that over and over again, we took the proactive approach and we said, okay, listen, guys, if we look at our forecast, if we look at our growth path, we
Right.
think that we're going to need X amount of shelving, X amount of racking, etc., within the next couple of years, or maybe 2 or 3 years. You can, I would say, vary with that period. Uh, what could we do together to make sure that we don't have to send out the RFP, that we guarantee that you give us the best pricing, and best doesn't mean the lowest, but it means the best price quality combination. And it saves us time, of course, sending out the RFP. You know that the quality is there. You know that that supplier can already take it to account within his forecasting. Also, when he should start supplying us with set goods or services. Uh, that is, I think, one of the nicest examples that you saw. And of course, at that point, you start off by sending out a bigger request for quotation, or a bigger tender. I would say is really like tender tragic over there. Uh, but yeah, I think the outcome of that was very nice, and it also caused some sort of uniformity and standardization in the way we could order those materials, those shelving and the racking, but also in the layout of the warehouses. If you use different suppliers, although it's a pretty standard solution, you would still see small differences between one layout and the other. And if we yeah, if you take into account that you also have to have your forklifting, et cetera, throughout those warehouses, the more you can standardize it, the better it is for the normal flow.
And I think that the example that you brought up there is a really interesting one, right? Because it hits on two things. It hits on the element of trust that I think is essential, for example, for proactive procurement, and also speed, which proactive procurement can be able to give you, right?
Yeah,
You had a
yeah,
preferred vendor, you had the
hmm
management of that vendor, you had a close relationship with that vendor, you had trust and speed at a forefront of the relationship, speed to be able to deliver the additional ask, right?
correct.
And
Yeah,
trust that the vendor was going to be able to deliver. It created a win-win
hmm
situation for you both,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I think that these are the new business currencies, right? Particularly, for example, in a world that is so volatile and ambiguous and complex and uncertain, right?
yeah.
We have to be able to trust our suppliers and we need to be able to work with speed. So I'm curious, where do you think that SRM plays a role into proactive procurement and or a proactive procurement mindset?
Well, I think if we touch upon the topic of trust, I think it's normal for, I would say, the procurement dinosaurs, I'd like to call them, that to mistrust your suppliers. They're always there just to make money out of our backs, or over our backs. Yeah, sure, everybody needs to make money. Everybody needs to put food on the table. But
Yeah.
I think that mindset is something that really belongs into the past. If you look at, can we trust our suppliers, or should we trust our suppliers, and what does SRM do in that regard? Moving to a really, I would say, constant SRM cycle, it really builds trust with your supplier, because it shows to them as well, that you're taking them seriously. You're putting them into some sort of a program, or process, or even software. It means that you're investing in them as well, and that of course also creates trust for them. And we get feedback from them that we can build our own, I would say, reports on, our own data on. Uh, so yeah, I think that is, in my opinion, what SRM how SRM would enable trust with your suppliers. So back and forth.
It's the life cycle approach, right? And I think that that's something that we spoke about in some of the pre-work as well, as managing the life cycle, managing the contract, managing compliance, risk, quality, performance, and collaboration, right? That's typically the work that gets put into the hands of procurement. However, the work that sometimes gets done before procurement gets in the loop, which then creates a ecos or sorry the environment in which then procurement gets looked at as a policing function is that you said something to me that I loved. You said that people love to source. It's almost an innate human thing, right? It's
It
people
is,
love to
yeah.
buy, right? We like to pick the
hmm
new thing off the shelf,
Yeah,
right? We like to choose that new shiny supplier. But
correct.
then the supplier gets thrown over the fence and everybody hates the rest of the procurement process.
hmm Yeah.
Why do you think that that's the case?
I think people generally just hate admin work. You have a couple of, I would say, people that really enjoy it, but it's the minority.
Yeah, but is can I ask you there, Bart? Like,
Sure.
is life cycle management and performance management of a vendor, is that administrative? Is sourcing administrative, right? And how do
No,
we
no,
make
no,
sure
no.
that it doesn't feel that way?
Well, I think you touch upon, okay, the picking the new supplier, but then after everything is done, you throw it over the fence, and then procurement can deal with the admin stuff. So that was what I was referring to. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
the rest of the procurement process is also something that people don't like, because at that point, when procurement gets a seat at the table, we start confronting them with the, I would say, the contractual stuff, but also more the, okay, how can we make this work over the longer period of time stuff. And that's not really the most sexy part. You have a new supplier, you found them, you know that supplier can actually deliver what you want, and then,
yeah,
here comes procurement, across the corner, say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about our sustainability goals? Have you thought about, the payment terms? Have you thought about doing a risk analysis, etc.? So, we are dealing with, I would say, the non-sexy stuff. Uh, and I think it's also a role, and I would say almost an obligation of procurement, to challenge specifications that come out of your
yeah.
own teams. Uh, I've seen it happening, that the shelving example, for example, what I was just talking about. If the business would have their way, they would have gray or golden colored racking, but the standard racking colors are blue and orange. Uh, so if somebody comes up with a specification and say, well, this is the way that we want to have our warehouse laid out, and it's got to be gold, then we can say, sure, we can do that. Or you can move to the standard, which is blue and orange. It's we don't own the specification. We will challenge it, We will not own it because we will, save money or we will get it cheaper, not fulfilling what the business stakeholder actually needs. But I think, that's so people love to go out, love to go outsource, love to go and find what they think is the best deal. But then if they get to procurement and we have, for example, already have a supplier or we are challenged a specification, yeah, people they usually don't like that. They tend to
Really?
want to stick with what they have found, and sometimes there can be those can be ugly discussions. But that's also the role that we have to play, of course.
Awesome. Well, listen, I think that it's obvious, right, that procurement is in a position to be able to extract the most value from a vendor relationship in a sourcing process and also post contract, right? And they're experts at it. Um, and I think that in our world of supporting vendor, or in vendor relationship management, we see that, for example, supporting good intake from the business and creating a good experience for that intake or requests or specification,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
capturing from the business is a great way to be able to involve procurement early. That's just one small item, though, right? I mean, the procurement process is a robust one. How do you believe that teams can best design, if you were to break down a source to pay process, right? And you don't need to break it all the way down, but I'm just curious as to how do you think that a procurement process is best designed that people actually want to use, and maybe also then people that aren't in procurement as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think if you find out how that works, and I think it's different. It's different for any company that you would talk to, because every company has its own, I would say, ambition, has its own culture, and has its own way of working. Uh, but getting people to like procurement, I think that's the holy grail. We're usually not the most liked people within the company, unless of course we find a great supplier, unless we can, mitigate a risky situation, or if we can actually save money. But yeah, usually I think if you are able to create some sort of satisfaction with the procurement team, you will get invited earlier and earlier. And I've seen it happen with companies, where with the bigger projects we were actually moved to the front of the project, so to say, really always also introduced. And I think, if you look back, those projects were usually where the most value was added, not just for that certain project, but also for the longer term, because those projects and those cooperations with the supplier usually led to multiple cooperations in the near future. So I think, if you would design the source to pay process, either it's, hey, we already have a supplier for you, you can just pick from the catalog. Or if you don't have a supplier, just put in your request, what do you actually need? Just put it in writing, like an AI style. I need to have this and this and this. And, put it into a funnel and let's see what procurement thinks of it. Either we will move you to a catalog because you've asked for a triangular table, but we actually only have sourced and have contracted rectangular table. So, too bad for you, the triangular table is not going to happen. Or if you say, well, but I do need to because that's the only table that will fit in the room, then we'll go out and source it for you. So it's offering those multiple solutions where people can actually choose from and feel heard, and not just policed.
Good insights. And I think that there's an aspect there that I think, it's the stamp that procurement typically gets, that that it's a rigidity. But what you're explaining is a rather fluid and pragmatic approach to procurement, and
Hmm.
I it's one that I share and I like a lot. You work on a lot yourself of S2P projects, and I want to talk a little bit about tech. We mentioned it before. You're working currently on an S2P ERP transformation project. Um,
Correct. Yeah.
what is the biggest lie that companies, procurement teams, or just generally businesses tell themselves before starting a big S2P project, whether they choose a suite or, for example, a best of breed approach?
I think the biggest lie is that, we communicated that once in an exco meeting, the CEO or the CFO, whoever is the sponsor or the owner of the project, has communicated it into a big town hall meeting, and assumes afterwards everybody is on board. All the stakeholders are informed, everybody's liking it, everybody wants to have this. So
That's
Bart,
interesting.
go ahead. And then, the first person you talk to is, I'm not convinced. This is not going to add any value to my project or my process. I've already have everything laid out. I'm working with the favorite suppliers. My processes and my procedures are all laid out. So I know what he said. I'm not buying it. So the biggest lie is, I think that I would say top management actually thinks that all the stakeholders are automatically on board once the message is conveyed. It's not. It's definitely, that's the biggest lie.
Can I ask you, can
Mhm.
can tech decisions or decisions about elements of the tech stack be taken in a top-down perspective in a world where AI is so prolific, but user interface and user experience is so necessary to be able to make real impact for value, but also, as we talked about before, speed, right? I mean, are we in a are haven't we transitioned out of that particular mode of
I, th- I,
operating?
th- I think there's some sort of an ambiguity because you need to have some sort of standardization and uniformity, and those decisions usually are best taken from the top. Of course,
Sure.
well informed. Okay, which kind of tech are we using? Are we going to go for a cloud decision, or are we going to go for on premises? So I think those decisions are usually made on top. But if you really want to uh, make sure that the system or the software that you're buying is actually going to be used, you need to involve whoever's going to work with it. So uh, what the project that I'm currently working on is, the decision actually to what we're going to use, of course, has also been made based on use cases. So in that regard, we already involved business users, key users. Okay, guys, what are the I would say the normal procurement processes that flow throughout the company. And mind you, we have about 50 opcos that we need to convert from, I would say 20 plus ERPs to one new software. So it's going to be a hell of a job. And you will have unhappy people at the beginning. Hopefully, they will transition into happy users, of course. But we
Yeah.
have used the people and the input from the users upfront. We've made the decision, okay, which kind of supplier, which kind of software would best fit, not 100%, because it's unrealistic to expect that. Then the decision is made, from the top. Okay, we're going to do this. That's, I would say, more a financial decision. And then, of course, when you start really going into the design phase, which is actually what we are on the forefront from currently, you need to involve those users again. Okay, guys, these were the use cases. This is what the software actually has to offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to be enabled to enable you minor tweaks and changes in the system, but I think I said it in the beginning of this meeting or the beginning of this podcast as well. You need to safeguard your standardization, because the minute you actually start tweaking your source to pay system, your software, and you have updates, it's going to be a hell of a lot to do with regression testing and stuff like that. So what we have, we've taken this opportunity as well to start looking at the processes and to standardize those as well. So uh, to be able to standardize those, you need to have the people of the business out of the business on board again. So we have also invited them for a number of design sessions as well, where the message will be clear. It's standardization, and if the
Yeah.
standardization is not possible because of some very important reason, then we'll look at maybe creating something out of the box. But it's going to be an off the shelf solution if we have any say in it.
Hmm. Interesting, and I think that goes back a little bit to the lie that businesses tell themselves, right? Is also maybe that technology is going to fix the problem that
Yeah.
process and people otherwise need to be able to
hmm
fix. And I think that is the symbiotic relationship, the Venn diagram that has existed forever, right? Of
Yeah.
people, process, and technology. And we say it ourselves to our prospective and existing customers. We only play part of we're only part of the puzzle, right? And I think that it's important that those other two are aligned. You said that it's unrealistic for 100% fit. That was something that stuck out to me. Um,
Mhm.
A, what's good enough? And then B, you've sourced a lot of solutions, right, out there on the market. You've then implemented a lot of solutions. How does one determine, what deems as good enough in a sourcing process of technology, right? Where, for example, requirements are almost always going to be, greater than the
Mhm.
market's capabilities.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think if you find a solution that has the answer to the use cases that you set up together with business users, and you find during the design and build session that software can actually deliver on those use cases, then you have a software that is good enough. And of course, you don't want to settle for just good enough. You want to settle for what can we actually get that will also build value going
Of
forward, and,
course.
and where can we get redundant processes, redundant policies uh, out of our way of working. Uh,
Mm.
But what I meant with, it's never going to be 100%, is there will always be operating companies or business units that are in some way unique, and will see that the solution that you're bringing to the table, that you're trying to roll out as a standard way of working, will simply not fit them. And that's,
Right.
so if I were to name a percentage, Sam, I think 80-85%. If you can cover that with your standard processes and procedures, and with your system, in the most standardized way, I think you have a winner. That would be my take on things. Yeah. Also looking at my history with implementation of these kind of systems.
Love the response and love the outlook as well. Again, a pragmatic one, which I don't think that procurement professionals get enough credit of. In my opinion, one of the more pragmatic role players that there are in
Yeah.
enterprises. I want to talk about success of procurement technology, right?
Mhm.
What does success look like? Is it user adoption? What's that North Star KPI for saying, yeah, this was a good project. We delivered value to the business with this technology implementation?
Uh, I think user adoption is the key driver for success of any source to pay, purchase to pay ERP implementation. If you don't find
Okay.
users that will actually use the system, then you might as well, just throw it into the bin, because that's what's going to end up. People, if they don't use the system, they're going to find ways around it. You're going to be stuck with a very expensive bit of software that will just be there, will not contain the full data set for procurement to make valid decisions on, or well-informed decisions upon, I should say. So yeah, user adoption, both for procurement, of course, but also from the key users that have to work with it on a daily basis to get orders out of the door towards our suppliers, towards our vendors. I think that is the key success factor in any ERP or source to pay implementation.
I wanna talk a little bit about source to pay. It's
Mhm.
this era of the suites that I think is kind of coming to an end, and think what you will about it. I'm curious, where do you think that the suites, maybe for example, overextend themselves still today, and that there's white spaces in for best of breed for providers to be able to be adopted and or run in parallel?
Um, Overextending. I think the looking back, I think what worked best is if that software just sticks to what it actually is used for. So source to pay for me, is built out of or made up of two big blocks. It's source to contract and it's purchase to pay. Source to contract is the more strategic part, which is usually used by our procurement professionals, and then you have purchase to pay, which is actually, I think, if you come close to some sort of an Amazon like, ordering look and feel, then you have gold. But if you're trying to make it more complex, and if you are asking of the users to fill in cost codes, and whatnot, then you're already overshooting. Yes, it will be good for the financial department to have those costs booked on whatever general ledger they need to go on. But if you're, I would say, creating a big hassle for the users, then you're already overshooting what the system actually should do. So I think the KISS methodology, keep it simple and stupid. I think that works best also for these bigger softwares. Make it what's the word I'm looking for? Make it easy to use. Make it like people, if they open it, they don't need to have hours and hours of training. I've worked with those systems as well, uh, where you actually were able to navigate throughout a system. But if you open a software or whatever tool that you're using, and you have the feeling that you might actually know how this works within the first go, without little to no training, then I think you have the golden system, and it's not over exaggerating or over complicating stuff.
Again, goes back to UI and UX. But again, back to the question, if we center back to it, where are the
Mhm.
gaps in the source to pay suites that there are out there? And listen, we don't need to name names, but there's some three-letter ones that are out there. There's some
Mhm.
other ones that are out there in the market. I mean,
Mhm.
where are the gaps? Because they exist, right? We hear it from our market, from the market ourselves. Where
Yeah.
are the pockets in the broader source to pay process that you see it in your implementations?
I think it's the ease with which you can manage your suppliers. I think
Hmm.
there's too little focus on that. So the outside the SRM possibilities within the systems are not well enough. Uh, I think also uh, I think that's actually the main one. I think the ordering part, what I just mentioned, the ease of use for the end users. I think we have a couple of good players that can actually facilitate that and give you that real Amazon-like feeling. It's more the
Yeah.
strategic part, and also, of course, where the value is actually made. So the I would say the source to contract bit with sending out RFPs and then maybe comparing them, using AI within the system itself. I think that's where the development still lies.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
And interesting as well. So it's more so on the traditional sourcing or e-sourcing, source to contract, as well as SRM. Do you see the same thing, for example, within the space of spend analysis and spend management, or have the suite solved for that?
I think spend management in terms of reporting is I would say not really a big gap. If you're talking about, for example, Maverick or tail spend management, uh, I don't think that it's a gap within the system. I think it's a gap within the companies to actually address that issue and
Mm,
and try and solve it. Uh,
interesting.
People say, well, it's just petty spend, but that's petty spend. If you add it all up, it's a huge number. People usually uh, uh, scare themselves when they see the number that you're actually talking about, which is going to suppliers that you haven't contracted and therefore are not managing.
And I think that spend under management is a big question. And we talk
Hmm.
about this a lot because I think sometimes, and it's a back to maturity thing in the business. The question is it spend analysis that one needs, right? To be able to
Hmm.
spot that spend, tail end spend, or do you need to fix the process, right? Again,
Yeah.
back to the perspective of proactive procurement, which I think is
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
bringing things back to where we started the conversation.
No, I was going to say, I think you need the analysis to really pinpoint where the issue within the process lies. If you see, for example, a certain segmentation of spend that is going towards the wrong suppliers, or there's absolutely no management about or on, and people are, I would say, basically free to do whatever they like to do.
Yeah.
You get that from the analysis. You see that, okay,
Mm.
for this amount of spend for these suppliers, we don't have any contract in place. What kind of spend is it? Oh, it's actually, well, something that we might find very interesting to make the contract for. So it starts with the analysis, but you're absolutely right, Sam. After that, after you make the analysis, you need to fix the process, and the process can be, for example, putting as much as possible within the catalog, and there could also be a catalog that you maintain yourself, so that people actually know, okay, I don't have to go out along the system. I actually they need to stay in the system because procurement has made sure that we now have a place to go where we can actually source that stuff.
Great insights. I think I know the question. What's worse, a bad system or that people are forced to use, or a great system that no one adopts?
I think the worst is a great system that nobody adopts. Yeah. If you have a bad system that people are forced to use, at least you will have some insight. At least you will have, yeah, you will force between brackets the users to actually use suppliers that you have contracted, that you have selected. It will be, with a lot of complaining. It will be with a lot of complaining about the role that procurement has played in that, and that the system is not easy to use. But if you have a great system and nobody's adopting it, it's way worse because you have no insights, so you have no way of controlling and steering where the spend actually goes.
Okay. All right. That's a good take and an interesting
Hmm.
one. Aligned with what I assumed that the answer was going to be as well. Um, yeah. One last question on the technology piece.
Hmm.
If people, we did a webinar recently about the path towards becoming a more AI native procurement team, and I think a lot of people are are struggling right now with what does AI native even mean. Well, of course, it means that, for example, the foundation of your decisions are and or your ways of working are embedded in a um, agentic, future where you are turning to AI as the first solution to any of your problems, right? That is the core of the definition. Now, there's a journey there. You can't go from
Hmm.
working in
Nope.
spreadsheets to
Nope.
going to being AI native. And I think that we talk about this a lot with our customer base, right? And there's a journey of being AI enabled, AI powered to AI native. And we laid this out in a webinar that we did recently. With that being said, the point that I'm getting to is that when we did a survey of those in attendance, we found that I think it was 80% sat within the bounds of that. 25% had not yet started their AI journey at all, and the additional then 55 or 60% that was then there was in the space of being AI enabled, meaning that they were maybe utilizing a Copilot or an OpenAI, a Claude,
Mhm.
a Grok for querying of some sort, right? To be able to extract insights rather than being fed with and or having an agentic state, which I would say powered an AI native look like. If you were to give, one or a few tips to a business today, right, of trying to start their own AI journey, particularly in the source to pay landscape,
Mhm.
what would those tips be?
Just start using it, start doing it, and then you will make mistakes. But the minute you start using it and you start improving your prompt, improving how you feed the system as well, I think you're building it. And I think a lot of people don't see that because they don't trust it. They fear where their data is actually going. I've recently joined. No, sorry, I was recently present at a conference where actually a software supplier was showing their agentic output, their agentic way of working within their
Mm.
software, and I was amazed, because I was really feeling like if we can use this in our upcoming source to pay implementation, this will create such a great user-friendly environment for people that are not really sure which catalog to use. If a supplier is already in the system, it's really typing in, "Hey, chatbot," or whatever the name will be. I know the name, but then might give away which kind of software it is. But I need to purchase this and this. Do we have a contract for that? And then the
Mm.
system will actually spit out, yes, we have a contract. You can move to here, move to there. So it's yeah. If you don't start using it, if you don't start just trying to use it, and if you don't have or if you're not investing in software that actually enables this agentic AI, then I think you're gonna be lagging. Yeah.
I agree with you, and with that being said, I think that you and I are probably in a bit of a bubble in a lot of respects, and not to say that that's a bad thing, right? But we're probably in the you're probably in the camp yourself, Bart, and some of the organizations that you work with of that kind of early adopter camp, or at
Hmm.
least in the
Right.
middle when it comes to the curve of AI and adoption of technology.
Sure.
I think that the thing that I'm curious about from your perspective is you heard and saw this amazing presentation
Hmm.
at a conference. You saw this awesome tooling, right? And my guess is that there was a lot of practitioners that were sitting to the right and the left of you and thinking the exact same thing. Wow, this could be able to really change my world. Now, with that being said, Gartner has a statistic that procurement teams get 2 out of 10 solutions that they want to buy. So then my question to you is, what's up? Right? What
Yeah.
if we know that we need technology, if there's an
Yeah.
appetite to adopt new technology, why is it not getting the investment that it deserves?
I think because most companies want to invest in technology or software that actually makes them money, rather than manage the spend. And yeah, that's I would say moving back to procurement dinosaurs. But I think that's the historical take on procurement. You're a cost center. You need to save us money. You need to manage the contract. You need to find suppliers that actually adhere to our values, our culture. And software needs to be as well, pardon my French, but it needs to be as cheap as possible.
Mm.
No doubt about it. So if you can do it with an Excel sheet, and if nobody's complaining, then fine, do it with an Excel sheet. But we will invest money in where we actually see possibilities to make money rather than to add value through a great procurement process. And it's yeah, I would say sad to acknowledge that, but that's
Yeah.
how I see it. Yeah.
So where's the case, right? How do we break out of that narrative that it's good enough with the Excel sheet, right? Like what would your tips be to somebody that's trying to go and inspire their organization to invest in their procurement tech stack?
That's a good question, and if I had an answer, then I think I would be an even more sought after consultant than I'm currently than I currently am. But
Yeah.
no, I think you of course you have companies that more and more start to see the proactive role of procurement. The seat at the table as it is called, rather than just reporting into the CFO or the CEO or you having yeah. I actually reported into a chief operating officer, which is also a very interesting way of working. Uh,
And
but being given that seat on the table, I think is the first step, and from that, you can also have that discussion on budgeting and making sure that you can present the right tooling, the right tech that you can actually use to start adding value. And I think adding value is a much broader concept than just generating savings, and I think companies that are still fixated upon the fact that procurement needs to generate savings, that's your main goal. I think when those companies move towards, okay, procurement, you can actually add value. I think when you have that transition, then that might open up the doors to actually invest in software and invest in tech for procurement as well. If those doors remain closed because, like I said, procurement is seen as a saving machine, no tech for you, because you're just going to cost more money, and that's not what we see procurement doing. No.
And I think that that's a fair point. And I think that, what we advise businesses to do, whether it's our technology or any technology they're looking to buy, right? Because there is this aspect of that. I think that there's an overestimation on or an over indexation on the importance of a business case, right? Truly being able to not only show, though, the return on investment, because return on investment, of course, is pixie dust in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, unless if
Yeah.
it's realized, right? What I
Correct.
think that is the metric that we talk a lot about internally, but also with our prospective customer base and existing customer base,
Mm-hmm.
is the cost of an action. What does it cost if I continue to do the exact same things that I'm doing today, right?
Yeah.
And being
Yeah.
able to build a case from that perspective, I think, is a lot stronger in a lot of ways. With also determining what is the value add that we
Mm-hmm.
have,
Yeah.
to be able to, again, as you say, really earn that slice of that budget.
Mm.
Albeit, I think that, procurement is professional buyers. I think, unfortunately, sometimes they struggle to buy for themselves, right? Because they don't recognize that position of having to sell in a lot of
Mm-hmm.
ways.
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm curious to pick your mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
In 5 years, crystal ball, right? There's no rights, there's no wrongs, and let's be
Okay.
honest, I don't think if you asked anyone 5 months ago what was going on, that they could be able to say what's going on today. But
Yeah.
in 5 years' time, what do you think that as you quoted a few times, procurement dinosaurs will be forced to admit that they got pretty wrong?
Um, I would say, anybody that feels spoken to now, I apologize. But I think, the focusing on the yearly savings, the really short term focus. I think 5 years from now, people will look back and say, okay, that we might have done that better. With the use of tech, with the use of course, certain software, with the use of SRM tooling, we might have been able to get more out of those suppliers and really build partnerships. Uh, if you work on a yearly negotiation cycle, and your suppliers that you have worked with for a longer period of time also know that, they know that you're going to invite them again, at year end or
Yeah.
whatever period you're using. Your 1 year contract ends. They're going to ask you your procurement is going to ask you for a new price. The supplier is going to supply a new price. There's going to be some back and forth. We're going to negotiate, and then everybody walks away from the table pretty happy. But I think everybody needs to realize that those suppliers, they know that you're going to invite them again, so they will build in some margin in the pricing that they're going to offer to you, and then you're going to talk down that margin, and you're going to talk down the price increase that they no doubt will show you. But they will get what they want, and you will feel happy that you've actually talked down, the price increase. And it's so short-sighted, Whereas if you would have a longer-term contact with that supplier, and you would not just focus on, okay, how much can your price increase, but what can you actually do to support us both in making sure that we have a stable pricing, or that we can actually start looking at supplier innovation, or that we can look at bigger sustainability goals that we can actually bring to market together. I think that I wouldn't actually say it's the way forward. It's the way that it's done currently. But people that are stuck in, I would say, the I want to have a yearly negotiation round and I want to get the best deal out of it. Those people are becoming extinct, I would say.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that what you're talking about there is the ability to be able to pattern disrupt, right? Because if you are in a cycle that is same, well, then you're going to get same outcomes, right? And I think
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
very interesting approach as well.
Hmm.
What's one hill that you're willing to die on, a procurement hill, so to say,
Yeah.
even if some of your peers would maybe disagree with you?
Well, we've talked about procurement beyond being a policing or having a
Mhm.
policing name. I truly believe that you need to have processes and policies in place.
Yeah.
And it's not to, it's not to annoy people within the business. It's not to, form some sort of unnecessary bureaucracy within the company. No, it's also to make clear to your colleagues, hey, how do we do business? How do we buy from our suppliers? What do we do in order to have I would say, a seamless flow of procurement processes throughout the company? Uh, so, when people say, well, I just want to, let it all go, and our colleagues actually know how to buy, they have heart for the business, so they will know how to deal with it. That might be, but you're going to end up with 101 procurement or purchasing processes, and you will have an accounts payable department that will get invoices in that they have no idea how to treat them or how to pay them. So, it sounds like I'm moving back actually into the policing bit and being more a bureaucracy tiger, but that's not the way. But you need to have a certain level of those policies and procedures, because they will provide guidelines to whoever needs to do purchasing activities within the company.
Awesome insights. Bart, we could talk for a very long time. We need to unfortunately start rounding out. Before I let you go, I want to do a quick fire round we do with all of our guests. A few
Mhm.
questions about you,
Okay.
not about you as a procurement professional, though, but about you,
Hmm.
Bart, as the person. Sound
All
like a
right.
plan?
Sure. Let's go for it.
I'm always curious with procurement people. Are you a Mac or a PC person?
I have both actually, but for work, I'm a PC person.
Oh,
Yeah.
and that is very pragmatic of you, as I would have
Yes.
expected as well with your pragmatic approach to things. So that's
Yeah.
very cool. It's very cool. All expenses paid trip on Kodiak's bill. You're able to go tomorrow. Take your family and friends, or head by yourself. Where are you going?
Ooh. An all expense paid trip. I would go to a nice, warm and sunny island together with my family.
Ah,
Yeah. We have fond memories of visiting Rhodos and a very nice Greek island. Yeah, we had a blast. It was only 8 days, but it was perfect. The sun was shining, the food was good. What more could you wish for? So yeah.
not much, to be honest with you.
Nope.
Is there a book that is on your bedside table and or a podcast that you come back to, either in a professional or a personal context, one or the other? No worries if it's not professional.
No, that's fine. I actually have two that come to mind. One is I read a book from, I think it was Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference,
Yeah.
which I thought was sometimes hilarious, because okay, sure, you get the deal done, and you're never going to split the difference, but it actually gave me some nice insights.
Yeah.
But from a personal point of view, I devour books when I'm on vacation. We're looking forward to our 3 week trip to the south of France coming up in July. Usually able to read 7 or 8 books when I'm there. But that's more like I would say the David Baldacci, John Grisham, alike. But what is it? I have actually right here after me. It's where is it? Oh, the Dan Brown, of course, Harlan Coben. Those kind of writers. That is something that I enjoy reading, and I actually read in English then as well, because I think the English language, when you read kind of like those riddle like books, it comes better across than reading it in Dutch.
Okay. Understood. What is one Dutch delicacy and or how would I say, maybe tradition that people don't typically know about outside of
Hmm.
Holland?
Ooh, I think you know a lot about Holland because we're famous, of course, for our snacks.
Right.
Um, uh, but I think, wow, what would be a delicacy? Wow, that's a good one. Yeah, I'm very fond of having a nice dinner and a good glass of wine, but I'm also very much interested in, of course, the snacking. If I focus, if I zoom in on the region that I live in Nijmegen, which is more on the eastern part of the Netherlands. We have a very nice delicacy over here, which is kind of like it's bread. Actually, it's a cake form. It's filled with pudding. It's filled with all kinds of nice fruit. That's a delicacy that I don't think that many people have heard of. But Nijmegen is also very famous. You don't have, I don't think you have heard of it. The frikandel, which is like like a hamburger, but then shaped like a bar. But they actually put sweet sprinkles on it, and it's called the disco
Mm.
del. No, it's not. It's horrendous, but
The
but still,
disco
people.
del.
Yeah, well, I think if you have 15 beer, then it will taste good. Yeah, but not before
A
that. But it's
hamburger with sweet sprinkles.
Yeah, well, it's the frikandel is, I would say, it's a hamburger, but then shaped as a bar.
Yeah.
And yeah, they cut it open. They put mayonnaise in it, which for foreigners is also something like, "Ooh, mayonnaise, okay." And then they also put the sweet sprinkles on it that you can get on your ice cream cone. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
that is definitely a delicacy that I've never heard of, and I'm not sure if it is a delicacy, but it's
No, no, no,
intriguing
no,
enough
no.
that I would want to try it for sure at
Me
some
too.
point.
Yeah, I've lived here for since 2011 now. I've never tried it. I don't. Maybe I haven't had enough beer to dare and try it yet, or I just feel already appalled by the idea.
Well, I'm happy that you tried your hand at talking to us and came on
Sure.
today's episode. This was an awesome episode, and thank you so much for sharing so many insights.
Thank you too,
I think
Sam.
that this covered a lot of ground, particularly for people that are technologists, particularly for people that are looking to make a change in their organization, for particularly for leaders in procurement. There was a lot that we dug into today, and I thank you so much for taking the time. If people want to learn more about you or your services, what's the best way to do so, Bart?
Well, my LinkedIn page, of course, Proactive Procurement is also live on LinkedIn. I'm very much present on LinkedIn as well, so look me up. You have my contact details in there. More than happy to help and to have a discussion or a chat about maybe the Nijmegen delicacy.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the
Thank you
time.
too, Sam.
It was a pleasure having you.
All right, thank you. Bye bye.